This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Ding, 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 ding. Oh, I was trying to beat you to it. Oh, Amy Jacobson here, Bruce Wolf in for Dan Proft. You've been here for quite an exciting week. I hope you've catched up on all 4 seasons of Empire now, because they are filming the 5th Empire, season 5, I should say, right now. And Jussie Smollett was supposed to show up today and tomorrow for scenes.
Well,
but I don't think that he's going to be there today.
No.
After he bonds out?
Yeah, at 1:45.
Yeah, sure. But there's other big news, don't you know? The Department of Justice, we've been told, is going to prepare themselves for the Mueller report as early as next week. And William Barr, the new Attorney General, is going to decide. He'll send a confidential summary to Congress. And remember, he said this during his confirmation hearings last month.
I am going to try to get the information out there consistent with these regulations. And to the extent I have discretion, I will exercise that discretion to do that.
With more on this, let's welcome to the program Jenna Ellis. She is the constitutional law attorney, former prosecutor, contributor to CNN, Washington Examiner, and the Federalist. Wow, you have a long resume. Good morning, Jenna, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
So how much do you think that we will be released to the public in regards to this Mueller report?
Well, I think that initially it'll be heavily redacted, and but really the public should see the full thing, because then there won't be any spin on it. People can read it for themselves. Of course, the media will dissect it to pieces, and depending on which outlet you hear opinion from will depend on what everyone's take is. But I think that the full thing should be released, and the American public deserves transparency from a government that has now gone 2 years wondering exactly what Mueller is doing.
Now, McCabe is on this book tour, so already you have to throw some shade on whatever he says, because he's trying to hype a book. But he initially comes on one show, was it 60 Minutes, and says, it gives the indication that Rod Rosenstein was really seriously considering using the 25th Amendment to oust President Trump. Kind of seemed like he walked it back and said, we were spitballing with a whole bunch of things. And so, it doesn't seem like it's amounting to all that much about the 25th Amendment thing, does it?
Well, not as far as Rosenstein is concerned, and I think we dealt with that back in September when the New York Times released that report, and he was questioned at that point. But not only is McCabe on a book tour and obviously just trying to promote himself, but he's also a proven liar. He's lied at least 4 times, 3 in front of Congress under oath, and so anything that he says, of course, is not only self-promoting, but we simply can't trust. And so in terms of whether or not anything that he says is going to amount to anything, I don't think that either side, Republican or Democrat or Trump supporter or not, can take anything that he says with any amount of truth to it whatsoever.
All right. You're a constitutional law attorney, so you're an expert. We've got this case. Nicholas Sandman, the kid with the MAGA hat, is suing the Washington Post for a mere $250 million. And my question to you is, do you think that this lawsuit can actually go anywhere? And specifically, can we treat Nicholas Sandman, I know he's a kid, can we treat him as a public figure so that the standard is a little bit higher and it's a little bit more difficult to make out the libel case against the Washington Post?
That's a great question. And I don't think that, especially as a minor and given the entire context of how he became a public figure, if he's become one, that would have been only because of the defamation of the Washington Post and how the media failed to do any kind of due diligence.
May I interrupt you? Can I act like an appellate court and just interrupt you? Because it's fun.
It's called the Bruce Special.
It's fun for me to do. And you're accustomed to this, making legal arguments. How about the fact that, no, he's in this public mall? It's Washington. That's where people try to get attention to their causes. He was there.
Well, he was in front of the Lincoln Memorial waiting for a bus.
He's in front of a Lincoln Memorial. He's wearing the MAGA hat. And we can say that it was horrible that that people jumped to conclusions because of the MAGA hat, but he's wearing it to make some kind of political speech. That's what you're doing, which is fine. But it's also fair that then he's thrust himself into the public limelight. Don't you think that would qualify as a public figure?
Not at all. He's in a public forum, and just simply wearing a hat to try to bring attention to himself, if that was what he was doing. I mean, he was participating in this rally, but simply being in a public forum and exercising your First Amendment protected right to freedom of speech does not automatically make you a public figure.
Doesn't automatically, but it
so
could. And don't you think the law should evolve, considering we now live in this social media age and everybody is a journalist practically because we all have iPhones and we're all constantly reporting and tweeting and taking pictures of things. So maybe we need to be a little more flexible in our definition. And then Clarence Thomas the other day.
Not at all.
Okay, I'll
take a deep breath.
that.
Take a deep breath.
Right.
Not at all. Because
before you change subjects.
There's still other media outlets that they have a journalistic standard, and just because someone has access to a social media platform and people can take pictures in public, well, we've been able to do that since cameras were invented,
but
and we have the standard
changed.
of being able to be in a public forum.
But this is not like the Tornillo decision where somebody said you have to be rich enough to own a media entity and everybody should have access and the right to reply. We're living in a different era, but it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, but we're not talking about someone posting something on Facebook. We're talking about the Washington Post specifically not doing their due diligence, failing to investigate the situation, and really, I think that they acted recklessly with reckless disregard for the truth or falsity of their statement. Which
well, wait a minute. That's another question.
Statement under defamation.
No, the question would be the initial videotapes came out, and then they reacted to it. That might have been negligent, but probably wouldn't be reckless. Let me ask you this, though. Clarence Thomas, in an opinion, I guess it was a dissenting opinion on a libel case a couple of days ago, suggested that we throw back the First Amendment to the states. And aren't you a little bit fearful that we'd start throwing the Bill of Rights back to the states? Because if you throw the First Amendment back to the states, you could throw the Second Amendment back to the states, too, and pretty soon you could have New York confiscating your guns. Am I correct about that, Counselor?
Well, and thank you for the question, Your Honor. But we have to understand the Bill of Rights in context, and both the states and the federal government have an obligation to protect all of our pre-political rights. Our rights don't come from the Bill of Rights, whether or not it's the federal government or the state government that is enforcing them or seeking to infringe upon them. It's actually a redundancy protection. The government, whether the state or the federal level, is only vested with specific limited powers for the legitimate purpose of protecting our rights.
No, you know, and I have to interrupt you because of time and because this is a very unfair appellate court, and you've been wonderful. Thank you for your patience with me. But the problem is, as you well know, the original Bill of Rights does not apply to the states. It was only until a later decision that the 14th Amendment incorporated the Bill of Rights and gave us these federal protections. The First Amendment says that Congress shall not abridge freedom of speech. Theoretically, any state could do that, but we want that protection, and we want the protection for the Second Amendment as well. And isn't Clarence Thomas opening up a can of worms for the Bill of Rights if he throws the First Amendment back to these states?
Well, and that's a good question. But again, we have to remember that, you're correct that it says Congress shall make no law, and there are different elements to the states, and it depends on the state constitution. We still have to remember what the Bill of Rights is in context, and we also have to remember the legitimate role of government, and that only the specific limited powers that are given to the federal and the state government, and also, by the way, to the people. We always forget the people do have some power in terms of self-governance. But our rights are always supposed to be protected by a legitimate government, and I think that we're opening up a can of worms when we fail to recognize.
You know what? I wanted to ask you one more question before we let you go and get on with your busy day.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you.
Back to Andrew McCabe. Does he lose credibility when he says things that Trump's a possible Russian asset? I mean, I know that he's out there trying to hawk his books, but is this? Do you agree with?
He's just a ridiculous clown at this point. I mean, he would say anything, I think, in order to sell more books. And, the fact that we can't trust anything that he says, he's just making commentary at this point that I don't think anyone should take seriously.
Well, the problem is that we're investigating Trump because he fired Comey, and so he might be under the control of Putin. But a lot of people wanted Comey to be fired. Rod Rosenstein should be investigated because he might be under the direction and control of Putin, because he recommended. The Democrats recommended that Comey be fired. So I don't know that this should have triggered this.
Investigating the Democrats?
Yeah,
Right, exactly. All right, we're going to leave it there. Jenna Ellis, appreciate your time. You're a constitutional law attorney and former president and contributor to
Thanks so
CNN
much.
and the Washington Examiner and the Federalist. You have a very long resume. Thanks, Jenna. She joined us on
Thank you. Good morning.
She joined us on our turnkey